looks like we are up and running. Perfect. Alright, hello everybody. Welcome to today's class. Today is the third Thursday of the month, which can only mean one thing: advanced photography. Pull up the presentation. Oop, hold on, I think I forgot to grab the screen. Awesome, that should be showing up for everybody. Perfect. Well, without further ado, let's get into it. So, if we look back throughout the weeks of what we've been talking about since week 1 of this month, first and foremost, I'm Saxon, everybody. Nice to meet you. I'm the camera host. I've been doing this now for the last few years. Every week we do a different class with the same schedule, reoccurring every month, to really get through and talk about all of the things you should know as a beginning photographer who might just be getting started for the fall season now, or for that end of summer vacation you have coming up. There might be tons of different reasons you're getting into photography, but hopefully I'm one of the first people that you get to learn a little bit from and get yourself jump-started into it. In week 1, with our intro to cameras, we really just talked about the difference between mirrorless, DSLR, and point-and-shoot cameras, how the buttons of all these cameras are different, but they all lead to the same thing, which is processing and using your camera as a tool. And then we talk a little bit more towards the ends about lenses. Lenses you should think about getting, what focal length means, where distortion comes in, things like that, to kind of just give you a bare understanding of what you should be looking at if you just purchased a camera or you're just about to. Intermediate cameras, we learn a little bit more about the manual control. We talk about using things like ISO, shutter, aperture, taking them all one by one and learning them, putting them all together then to learn the manual control. Then from there too, we get into more finer details about things like exposure compensation, or our autofocus control, or our focus parameters, our white balance control, things that can elevate our manual photography to give us something that's more professional and more sought out or controlled. In advanced photography, we want to get away from all of that. The point of advanced photography is not to learn necessarily the controls of the camera anymore, but it's to learn the next step in our photography, our evolution. We're going to start by learning how to take good photos. After we talk a little bit about that, we're going to get into what it goes into editing photos. And then lastly, we're going to wrap up with content creation. Some of the things I think that you should know, and some of the accessories I think you should get to learn if you want to get into this realm. So let's start with some tips for taking great photos. These are tips that if you open up any basic photography booklet and you start to learn the difference between portrait and landscape, which are two of the most traditional kinds of photography, these are the tips that they're going to give. Now, my tips that I have for this can be applied towards anything. Landscape photography falls in the same boat as architecture photography. It's areas that you're taking pictures of. There's not one necessarily marked subject in your photography that you're trying to shoot. There's a majority of things that you're trying to shoot, whether that be trees or wildlife, whether that be buildings, skyscrapers, or landscape. And in portrait, it's a similar boat. You're taking pictures of people, but you can also take pictures of objects, of things, of dogs, of cats, of plants. Those all can count as portrait photography. Why? Because you're taking a picture of an object, of a thing, at a close proximity, and that's the main focus of your photo, is what a portrait would be. Starting with portrait photography. Now, the first thing I will say about all this is that these are the basic rules that you will see in your photography textbooks or in classes that you might study. But in photography, all rules are meant to be broken. There is one way to do things that is the more correct or professional way, and there's a second way to do things that gets the shot the way you want it to look and the way you want it to feel. And so I want you to keep that in mind as I talk through and talk about these different methods. It's because that while, yes, you can follow these to a T, a lot of the times these are just things to think about in the back of your mind that then you might want to change or manipulate later. In portrait photography, one of the first things we can do is fill the frame. Now, filling the frame might seem kind of simple, but it is something that works really well. By cutting out negative or excess space that doesn't add any benefit or value to the photo, we can eliminate things that will give nothing to our photo. In this case, we have a beautiful portrait. On the left-hand side, We have the extra molding from the wall, the shadows where the sunlight is creeping in on the left. From there, it presents this awkward kind of wall features that detract from the physical portrait. Rather than focusing on just our model or the portrait that we're taking, we now have all of this extra stuff going on. If we can focus in a little bit more with our camera, or simply in post crop the excess parts of the photo over, we can eliminate what's not needed and just focus on what is, which is our portrait. Something like this would be great for a headshot, for a resume, LinkedIn profile, whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. Something like this would fit that ballpark. In the realm of portraits, typically keeping the eyes in the top third are a good thing. Reason being is that humans do work like robots for the most part. We start at the top and we make our way through to the bottom. At least that's the way you're supposed to think as a photographer when taking photos. If we start there, then we're probably going to start at the top of our head and then make our way through the rest of the photo. That being said, keeping the eyes naturally in the top third is just an easy way to attract eyes or attention to the start and have someone then read through the rest of the image. Now again, this can change. If you see what she's wearing right now with the feathering on her dress, that could be a distracting element that might not direct us to the eyes. But after a few times of looking at it, you might start to lose focus on the dress and your eyes might naturally start to gravitate towards that top third. The same thing can be said when we're taking pictures of items or objects that fall in the portrait category. The tops of those items, or the very beginnings of those items, if they're positioned in the upper third portion of our image, it can then help naturally move the eyes through the image and just kind of an easy reading or easy passage of the look through of the item or the picture. And if the eyes aren't something that you can get into it, the eyebrow as a whole. Really what they're trying to capture on is that forehead, that top third of the head. If you split a head into 3 sections, there should be the forehead, usually between the eyebrows and the nose would be the middle section, and the mouth to the chin line would then be the bottom section of the face. If you're putting that into perspective, where the eyes are, or the eyebrows, for the most part, are what you'll see in the top third of most images, and that's where photographers find their sweet spot. Focusing in on the eyes is always going to be the benefit of the doubt. When you think about it, DSLRs had the technology, but it wasn't quite developed, but the mirrorless cameras have come a long way with eye detection technology. Almost all the cameras now have a way of tracking in on the eye of the human, and then from there it is able to focus everything else. So when in doubt, always focus in on the eyes. Your camera's eye tracking software and the features that are in there eliminate the chance of you getting an intense glare in the eye that can lead to red eye or leading to miscoloration of the pupil, of the actual eye itself. In this picture, if you look really closely, you can even see the line where her contacts are coming into the photo. It's pretty incredible. So using your camera's technology, focusing in on the eyes when it comes to portraits goes a long way. Brands like Nikon and Sony excel in this ballpark. Now, one that seems a little silly, but this is something that we should talk about, is dropping yourself lower when shooting. And I like this idea of kids specifically. A lot of the people I have come in are taking photos of their kids, their grandkids, little ones, nephews, nieces, whatever have you. And they want to make sure they get good, iconic photos of these kids so that they can show them later on. Now, as a professional photographer, something like this might not interest you as much. This feels very candid, very fun. You've got the one kid biting the little girl's arm. Everyone's got silly glasses on. There's a cake of some sorts, party favors. Everyone's having a really good time. But while this seems candid and something like you might have taken on a 35mm camera back in the day, dipping yourself a little bit lower and using your camera's pan tilt screen that is offered to you will really help you take photos from this to something more like this. Now it seems like this is a lot of more professional work. The lighting in there is very exquisite. It really offers a lot of nice color, and the color that's in the photo pops because of that. But when you think about it, if if we take everything we've learned from the last camera classes that we've taught, we're blurring out the background using our aperture. We're somewhere between an f4 to an f2.8. From there then too, we have really good lighting that's coming in, so our ISO doesn't have to be super high. And then on top of that too, the speed of these kids, unless the little girl in the background who looks like she's having the time of her life or moving at crazy speed, your shutter probably doesn't have to be that open, or that quick to capture this image. So that being said, it's really easy for us to take what we've learned from last week's class and apply it into something like this to still get the same quality that this offers without necessarily getting something as candid as this. So again, using proper posture and posure, we should be able to then lower our camera a little bit and take our more candid photo into something that gives us a little bit more pop of professionalism. And again, if we put other concepts into effect, the eyes, or at least the eyebrows of our first boy are in the rule of top thirds, and then so are the girl's eyes in the back there. Something small, but if you start to pay attention to that in a lot of photos and a lot of work, you'll start to pick up on that trend. Now, that being said, the rule of thirds within portrait is the second most important thing. So again, eyes are always important on our portraits, but the rule of thirds is one of the second, if not one of the more important ones when it comes to portraits. This photo, or this also goes into our landscape and our architecture photography, which we're about to talk about next. But think about it this way. Your photo is divided into 9 squares, or into 6 different sections. You have a top, a middle, and a bottom, and then a right, center, and a left. From all of those, we then have these red circles along these intersecting points of our image, or of our image surface. In theory, if you keep the subject within those red circles, or hitting on one of those red circles, natural eye movement and natural stimulation for the brain is going to kick in, and for whatever reason, scientists have determined that for humans looking at photography, this is a natural way to engage them a little bit more, following the rule of thirds. Landing your subject matter, your main focus, or whatever it is you're trying to take into one of those red circles will or should give the person viewing a more stimulating image. For example, we have the surfer and we have the shadow and reflection hitting on the right side of our rule of thirds. Now we do have a beautiful skyline that is also adding to this image, but right where they're crossing and we're leaving this wide open portion of the photo open, one might say, why aren't we using the rule in the beginning of the class where it's to fill the frame and get rid of excess space? And I think the excess space really tells a nice story. You've got this beautiful beach coast, not a single footprint in the sand. He looks to be some of the first ones. The sunset looks great. The people walking into the water show our movement and show just excitement on the whole thing. The water line meets perfectly with our background. One of the terms I'll then show you now that you'll see in the next one is our horizon line. Our horizon line is the line at which where the foreground meets the background. So where the water meets the sky is our horizon line. Everything above the horizon line is the sky, or our background. And everything below the horizon line becomes our foreground. That being said, our subject matter is perfectly resting on that foreground, and the fact that the actual horizon line hits perfect at the top of the rule of thirds just adds more to the photo. Gives it good symmetry, gives it good contrast at the same time though, and stimulatingly looks very appealing because of the colors, the shadows, and everything else. In a similar boat, we're doing another beach photo. We've got the shoulder on the one and then the ankle of the little girl being clipped by the rule of thirds. Again, our water is perfectly on the horizon line. And with that being said, we've got this really moody, dramatic shot. Clouds are circulating in, black and white photography as well too. We can't tell if that's light peeking through the clouds or if it's just naturally a sunny day with some clouds that are out and about. but overall it looks very interesting, and it looks brooding and kind of a little bit mysterious, just with that black and white feature. But it's an easy way to kind of see the rule of thirds played out. Another good one, I like this one of mom and dad and probably brother and sister. Mom and dad are offset to make up for their height being so much taller than the kids, so they've pushed them further back while bringing the two kids further forward. They're still not nearly as tall as mom and dad, but they're still pretty darn tall, or at least in comparison. The little girl's body or head is in the rule of thirds, but the little boy's isn't. So where that breaks what we were talking about before, this still then shows the height difference and probably the age difference between these two kids, which I would expect the photographer was going for. On top of that, mom and dad aren't perfectly lined up, but the kids and the parents are kind of scrunched together in such a way where they're not too far apart from each other, and you can still make out the difference between them. But another easy way to take advantage of that rule while leading yourself to a nice stimulating image. And then last, we've got Jim from The Office. I like this one. I've always kept this in my class. I just find it silly. But the fact that there is all this excess negative space might lead you to believe, why would you do that, especially for a show like this that's making a lot of money or made a lot of money. And the idea behind this is just to remind everybody that all these rules are meant to be broken. Not one of these rules is the most perfect absolute truth. In this case, by keeping excess space on this photo, if you watch the show, you already know that they're probably in the conference room where they're having this little mockumentary. But that being said too, those techniques, while not being implemented, still some follow. You got the eyebrows in the top third of the image. They didn't give him too much gutter space and remove his body. They kept that and the forehead in the top third. So it's little things like that that you'll see, even if you're just watching TV or the news now, on how they do things and how they run it. If you look at photography, if you go to museums or any of the other places, you'll notice those things too as you go. And that's one way that photographers have this kind of control or sense of control over their work. It's because they can implement things like this. So let's talk a little bit more about horizon lines, and let's talk more about landscapes. So again, I talked about horizon lines as where the background and the foreground meet. There is a line that separates them. A lot of the times within photography and art in particular, it's water. Water's always on the horizon line. And in this case, it's exactly what we're looking at here. The horizon line is this body of water on this lake. Our mountains and our sky are our background. By knowing our horizon line, we kind of already know what the rules of our horizon line is. Here we can see another good example of a horizon line. It's going to be right where the ice and the water meet. From there, then, we've got beautiful mountains, landscapes. You can see the symmetry between them. And the fun part is, too, is with that snow that's on the bottom, you really get that idea of the fact that the water has not a single ripple in it, yet the reflection that it's producing of its background is almost identical. It's immaculate. Within landscape photography, though, horizon lines and understanding the difference between the foreground and the background are a start. Understanding balance and symmetry is the most important aspect of the more street photography, landscape, and architecture. In this case, we've got a couple different things that are going. We've got balance and symmetry within the chaos. Where is our balance and where's our symmetry? If we look at the rows of lavender that are coming through this, we can see the color, we can see the shade, we can see the clear, distinct rows that are going on. From there, then, we have one tree that's directly in the center. So our balance and our symmetry is coming from that aspect of our photo, and then the lightning that's coming down is more of the chaos that ensues within this landscape or more of our architectural-based photography. In this case, we're looking at landscape. The same rules do apply to our architecture. In this image, we not only have just the symmetry and the balance of having that center tree, and then the mountains that then cascade from the sides that give it more of this bowl effect. It leads our focal and our center point to that bushel of trees, and then everything else radiates off a bit. But then again, similar to that other image, we have the beautiful lake that then gives us that symmetry, or gives us the exact same thing that we just saw on the top, but now on the bottom, reflected back in the water. So that's really the battle between taking portraits and for landscape, or portraits versus architecture. Architecture is a lot about the idea of balance, symmetry, and making sure that we highlight those. Thinking about the horizon line, thinking about where that exists to make sure we get the best angle possible. Whereas portraits, it really is just focusing in on the subject matter, cutting away excess space, blurring the background where it applies, but then also remembering too that if we don't have one focal point, then we might have multiple, and how that relationship works between them. It can be tricky, it can seem complicated, but the more you practice and you play with it, you'll be able to spot a bad image from a good image. And this one, I don't think this is that good, but I like the idea of this yellow line that cuts through the photo perfectly. Landscape, it's architecture, it's a man-made road, probably in a desert town somewhere, but that yellow line cuts through all the way to the end of the photo. Last few tips, and then we'll get right into the editing of the photo. But sun at your back, and just kind of the understanding of lighting. On your camera, you have two main controls for lighting. That's ISO and then your exposure compensation. Your ISO turns your sensitivity or your brightness of your camera's sensor up. It's good to turn that up when you're in darker situations, and that's to base it on the natural or artificial light that you're providing yourself. In exposure compensation, it plays on that same kind of idea, but rather than playing with the sensitivity, it plays with the overall exposure. Does your photo seem a little bit dark? We can make it brighter. Is it seem too bright? We can make it darker. One of the best things that you have as a photographer is the sun. The sun is your friend. And the more that you keep it faced on your back while you're shooting, the more that you keep it faced on your back or on your subject matter's back, the more time that you'll probably spend editing or changing things in post. The more that you can allow sunlight to be a part of your photo, it's easier to make a photo darker in post than it is to make it lighter. So by simply moving that fish out of the guy's face, cocking his hat up a little bit, and then playing with either the exposure compensation or the ISO to help make things brighter, you can turn a photo that looks extremely dark in the top corner over here, and then make it a lot lighter by simply changing not only just your environment, but a few simple switches on your camera that can help bring a lot more light forward in your photo. Less time that you now have to spend editing or changing things in post. Now we'll cross into the actual photo editing. So again, that was just a brief, talk a little bit about editing the photo, talk a little bit about shooting the photo and tips I'd recommend for that. But now let's look at JPEG versus RAW. This is one of the big debates that you'll hear a lot about as you start to progress forward in your photography journey. If you're a beginning photographer and you've never done this before, JPEG is always going to be the way you should start. It won't take the most detailed image, but it still takes an image that's going to produce a lot of information, and that information is still going to lead to really nice quality images. If you look at your RAW photo that you might be taking, you'll notice it looks flat compared to the JPEG. It doesn't necessarily have the same character, it doesn't have the same pop in the color area, things seem flat or muted, a little bit more dusty. And the reason that's the way that it is because you need to edit the RAW photo. And that's what processing a RAW then leads to. So if you look at the processed RAW versus the JPEG, it's a very big difference between the RAW versus the JPEG. The processed RAW shows more color. There's more vibrancy to it. The skin tone looks more rounded, has more flesh-like quality to it. His hair shows the different variation between the blonde and the brown, and you can really see that guitar strap leather where the wrinkles of the black shirt meet, how much more detail is there. How can you get that much more detail from the JPEG to the process RAW? Well, it's not only just editing, but it's the information that's there from the files. So a file that's a JPEG is a compressed file, meaning it's a smaller file size, about 2 to 6 megabytes in size. It's not a lot of information for you to have. Therefore, when you're editing this photo, there's not a lot for your computer to go off of. So that being said, it has a lower color bit. Now, these can be edited on any photo editor. So if you're brand new to this, you want to get into this, you don't want to spend a lot of money, Mac and Windows make their own free photo editor that you can use in their system, but it won't let you edit on a RAW. It's going to have to be done on JPEG. So that's the beauty of the JPEG. You can edit it on anything. And because the file size is compressed, smaller, and lower in the color bit, it can get transferred a lot faster. So if you're going on that vacation that you've been planning for 100 years, and you're going to take 10,000 photos, but you don't know if you're going to want to edit them, you're probably better off shooting in JPEG, taking all of them over, deleting the bad ones, keeping the good ones. But I will say, 80% of photography is editing your photo. It's that last little bit to put on a photo to make something pop. And that could be really simple. I got some examples of why we might edit our photos. But what you can expect if you're shooting the RAW format. Uncompressed file sizes, meaning larger. On the small one, 12 to 16 megabytes. My camera, which is 61 megabytes, puts each file at about 90 to 80 megabytes per photo that I take. So my SD card can only fit so many photos every time I go to shoot. That's why I keep 2 in the camera. That being said though, it has a higher color bit because of the file size, so 12 to 16 bit. Where does color bit matter? If you ever played with a photo editor, usually it's dials that you pull back and forth. If it's a RAW photo, you have more that you can play with when you're editing and you're changing those dials. When it's JPEG, the compressed file basically doesn't allow you to do a lot of big changes or heavy lifting. It'll let you change some things like saturation or color, but you won't notice such a drastic shift like you would if it was a RAW photo you were editing. Now the reason I mentioned before that you can do JPEGs on any photo editor is because RAWs you can't. So if you're going to get into editing RAW photos, you're going to probably have to pay for an editing software in order to do it. If you don't have that editing software, you're not interested, you can still shoot on RAW, but you're most likely going to have to convert it to a JPEG file to actually edit it on your computer, which in my opinion just takes away the whole purpose of shooting in RAW. So if you're going to get into RAW, you're going to have a lot more to play with, and we're going to talk about what that is you can do. But remember that you're going to need to purchase some new software or rent some new software. You're going to have to get used to editing photos, which does take some time. But what does like a simple sit down with editing your photos look like? That's what we're going to look at now. So these are my basics. These are how I start and go through by editing my photos. One thing I will say before I start it is that I do preface this to customers and the people I meet in the photography world. Just because I'm changing these things in this order doesn't mean I'm not going to go back and revisit them. So some of the things that I talk about, I'm going to mention it later on what I might then do to help flip the photo even more. And I'll explain that in a second. But here are some examples for why we're editing our photos. None of this that I'm about to show you right now is you getting rid of something in a photo. If there's a stop sign in this car photo that you took, the stop sign is still going to be there with what I'm showing you. There's technology, there's things that exist for you to do that. But what are we trying to get at with Photoshop? What's the fundamental idea here? It's to make things pop. We took a really nice photo, we took clean photos. Now we want to make sure that we highlight all of the best qualities of the photo. If we look at the top left, the purple in the man's sweater is brighter, it's more colorful. So is the little girl's dress. The background has more saturation to it too. That pops. The baby in the bottom left corner has a smoother forehead. Also the color, the skin feels softer. The newborn just kind of feels more a newborn. On the right side, if you're taking photos for school, you might end up editing them a little bit, bringing out color, highlights in the hair, the blue sweater that's buried underneath all of it. And then the same thing with the landscape photography. You've got a darker image on one side, you can brighten that up, lighten it up, allow for the color to seep through a little bit more by just playing with a couple different knobs and dials. Why do we edit our photos? It's just to give it that little bit more of oomph. These are some of the editing softwares you should look into. Again, all of these you pay for one way or the other, but if you're someone who's serious about doing this, a lot of these have free trials. You can try it for a week, see if it's something that you're into and you like, and if you do, I'd stick with it. So step one, we're going to crop and clean our image. So we're going to start by straightening the alignment of the photo. After that, I make sure I go through and I don't have any excess or negative dead space. Just make sure that my image is exactly the orientation that I want it. I then go through and say, okay, I don't necessarily need to see the mountains and all that skyline. Let me crop in a little bit and play with one of the first photo rules I talked about and just focus on what I want, which is the girl kayaking with the beautiful view in the distance of the clouds and the land. From there, then I might notice on there that I had some splashes of water that came up on the lens. Those splashes are going to create little black dots, circles, or things that are on there that I don't like. If I see those, there should be a section within your editing software called Spot Clean. That allows you to select a different area on your picture that you like, and then it'll color correct the area that isn't right. So that should help you eliminate those spots or water droplets or dust that might be on your camera or sensor. Next, I'm going to adjust my white balance. Now, white balance doesn't refer to exposure, rather it refers to the color of your overall compensation. Composition. You will have less to play with when you're shooting in a JPEG versus RAW, but some editors are going to have two different things. They're going to have presets that you can control and change. Others are going to have temperature and tint with dials that you drag back and forth, and some are going to have both. Again, the way to think about this is that the color white is not the same everywhere you go. Lighting or white balance is not going to be the same everywhere you go. I always use this room for example. You're present in it. People online you only see. But if you look at the room, we have canned recessed lighting that present itself on more of the orange side of the Kelvin scale. So it perceives to be warmer or more of a red tone. Therefore, I could balance out my presets by doing something like flash or fluorescent, something that could help me get rid of that by toning down the whites so they're not as intense. So we're playing with the lighting that my room has to offer to give me the best possible lighting or white balance. That being said, while some have presets or LUTs, if you will, others have dials, and that should go in the CMYK color standard. So it's a 4-color standard that as you drag and you pull those dials to, it'll lean it more towards temperature or towards its tint orientation. Again, that'll affect the whites of your photos, not necessarily the other things. Along that same path is our exposure and our contrast. So again, white balance focuses on the white of our image, but now let's take the whites, the darks, and mix it all together and play with exposure and contrast. Exposure, much like our exposure compensation dial on our camera, plays on the brightness and the darkness of a photo. Now it's the whole photo, so beware of making a photo too bright because it'll get muted or muddled, or beware of getting it So too bright makes it too muddled, my apologies, or muted, and then obviously too dark will then make it where you can't see anything. That being said, if we look at some of these before and afters on here, specifically this one all the way on the left, we can see that by playing with exposure, we can lighten the image or darken the image a little bit more. By playing with the exposure, we darken it in such a way where now we are bringing it towards more of a gloomy, dramatic image. So where this peak is coming from, we have this gorgeous sunlight coming over. We we really are taking full advantage of that exposure and getting those brights extra bright. And if those aren't bright enough, then we can play with contrast. That's the next part of this. Contrast plays with dark and light tones. High contrast makes the image start with very dark and light sections, whereas low contrast will make things look flat or washed out. And the goal is always to aim for the middle. And I think that a good example of contrast is going to come from the middle image, from the before and after. You can see that on the before section, things are very dark. You're not able to make out the individual rocks. While the image does still look really nice, it doesn't necessarily give us that goal that we're after, which is maybe getting the full definition or bringing out certain qualities. The after gives us more information, more detail, without having that muted or muddled look from the darkness. And then again, on the right side, we see the underexposed, the normal, and the overexposed. Underexposed, too dark; overexposed, too bright; and then normal is kind of just in the middle. A good way to measure this is with what we call a histogram. Histograms are ways of measuring light within your photos. Now, if you go on your camera and you press the display button or the live view button, you should have the ability to pop one of these up while you're shooting. What this is doing is your sensor is not looking at the image in front of you and telling you what it sees. Rather, it's measuring the light distribution from what it's picking up through its sensor. What we're seeing here on the chart is a perfect example of what a histogram should look like. Your midtones should be the most saturated area. That's the middle ground of your photo, so that should be your peak. Shadow should be the next biggest thing. If you think about it, while you have midtones everywhere, shadows offer that buffer of darkness, which then prevents or shows shadow, shows weight, shows depth. Highlights then are the lowest point. Why? Because they should only be the piece that's giving that little extra bit to your photo or to what the camera's picking up to make things pop. We need the midtones to give help to the shadows, and the highlights then come in to help midtones and shadows really pop. It's kind of the way that you think about painting. If you paint, you're mostly painting in midtones. Then once you've gotten through midtones, you're going to get into your shadows. And once you've finished up your shadows, you then finish your painting with highlights, with that texture. That's the same way to look at a photo. Midtones is primary, shadows are secondary, highlights are then the third. Now, are histograms needed? I like to say no. Are they cool? Are they useful tools? Absolutely. And it shows pretty accurately. If we look at this histogram here, we can see the difference. Overexposed properly and underexposed all show the histograms leaning in favor of one side or the other, except for the proper, which is then showing in the direct middle. On the right, though, are images that look, in my opinion, just fine. And some of them look really nice, especially those bottom two. Their histograms are not even whatsoever, nor are they even close to what the traditional histogram should be. Yet the images themselves present to be worth looking at, to have some sort of character or some sort of pop or color or drama or moody or some form of just something that captures the eyes and makes it more viewable. Histograms are only as good as you want them to be. If you don't think that the histogram is going to help you in your photo work, don't think about it. But if it is something you're curious about, yeah, your camera can do that as you're shooting. And if you're editing your photo, you can actually pull up a live histogram. As you change and do those dials, the histogram will reflect your changes. A couple more on the editing, and then we'll talk about our content creation at the end here. So, one of the last things that will change, vibrancy and saturation. Now, exposure and contrast, they focused on the shadows, on building that relationship between the dark tones and the light tones. We're out of that though now, because that's like thinking about black and white. Now we want to think about color, and how does color affect the photo that we're taking? Vibrancy, as we play with that, will increase or decrease the color intensity in the brighter images throughout my image. We can see that on the right side of the image. Minus 100 vibrancy, we lose a lot of that dog's color and the extra fun color that makes them the dog. The original shows it off really well, and I think the first thing we see it in is not only just the eyes and the fur, but that bright tongue. Then you get to more vibrancy, and now the tongue is too pink. It almost looks like salmon. From there, then the background is very yellowy and green. It's just not enough. It's too much. The original had a good amount. The plus 100 has too much, but the minus 100 has too little. Now that's just the color intensity on those images. You can see that for the majority of the image, it took the color that was only present in those areas and increased it. Majority of the image or the vibrancy stayed the same. Saturation, on the other hand, takes away from that and does the whole image. So again, contrast and exposure is perfect. Exposure does the whole image. Contrast focuses on the brighter or the darker colors. Vibrancy only focuses on the brightest colors of your image, whereas saturation will focus on the whole image evenly. And it's going to increase or decrease the color through the whole thing. And we can see that on the bottom image here, where our right side of the sky shows beautiful coloration, beautiful sky, that rainbow effect. The greens on the grasses, rolling hills are fantastic. The yellow pops even more too. There's just a lot more going on. Now, one of the last things I do when I'm editing my photos is the sharpness. Now, this is the last thing I will say before I read the sharpness one out. But before I get to this step, I'm going to look at the photos that I've now just gone through and changed. I might have to go back through and re-edit. Now, this is what I talked about at the beginning of the class, or the beginning before I started talking about this. Do not be afraid just because you already edited your contrast or your saturation or your crop and clean. Don't be afraid to go back. You might have missed something. You might not have adjusted something. By changing one thing, you might have offset the other. It's important to remember, just like when we're manually shooting in photography and we're changing the dials as we're going, when it comes to editing, we might have to go back and change something even if we've already done it. So don't be afraid to do that. It's not going to affect the image. If anything, it's going to train you more and more how to become more effective and how to become more personal with your editing skills. But the last thing you should be doing is the sharpness. It's the last thing you do. Sharpness will bring out definition and depth of field in the images. Too much is going to create that halo effect. There's a halo that's kind of coming around the fox on the left-hand side. You can barely see it. Usually if you squint it, you pull yourself back from your screen. But I think the frog shows it beautifully. The sharpness on the eye and the detail underneath the chin really pop by playing with the sharpness tool. Again, last thing you do after you've updated your color and everything else that you wanted on your photo, but doing that should really add the last piece of definition that you need in order to make this piece presentable and to take it from the 80% complete out of the camera to the full 100. Now again, I say at a glance with all these because as you progress and you start editing your own photos, you might find what's more valuable to you and more of what your process is going to be. But if you start with this process, I guarantee that at least the first how many ever photos you take are going to look fantastic. Once you start getting further along, you'll learn what exactly you need in order to make your photo 100%. Real quick before I talk about content and editing content, displaying or printing your images. This is silly, but I like to bring this up. There are too many customers and people I've met in life who take fantastic photos, but they just don't really care. They keep them on their computer or on their cell phone. They never see the light of day. Guys, if you're doing all this stuff and you're investing your money into camera equipment and beautiful stuff, be proud of what you're doing. Picture frames exist. If you're using a crop sensor camera, I'd recommend 4x6 to 10x12 as your biggest image sizes. Don't go any larger than that. If you're using full frame, 11x14 to 20x24, the world is your oyster. Print as large as you want. If you don't want to print your images and waste your money, then do digital picture frames. They're great gifts, but if not, they're great things that you can plug in and keep at your house. A lot of these do unlimited photo storage. You can put as much as you want. And it's cool because, you know, you could set this up for grandma and she could see all the cool pictures you're taking. You could set it up for your kids so you could see, you know, send them pictures of you and the missus. Whatever it might be, there's ways to display your work. Be proud of what you did. Now let's get into content creation. The reason we started this one in this class was because I've learned that a lot of people out there, you own a business, you own you know, a project that you're starting, you're an entrepreneur or a hobbyist of something, and you're trying to get your work off the ground. A lot of people don't want to go out and buy camera or rent out camera specialists to take and do their stuff. So they're coming in and they're investing all this money in their camera equipment and they don't know how to use it. Well, here's something to think about. You can go online and watch all the videos you want on how to shoot video, how to do all this stuff. But if you're just getting started, you want to learn on your own, here's my tips for how to think about this. So let's start with filming videos. There's three main places you're going to film video. Or there's three main steps in the process. There's pre-production, which is the initial steps. This is where you start writing stuff down. I'm going to shoot here. I want to get this scene. We're going to go to 1014 West Addison Street. We're going to film this right there. Okay, cool. That's the type of stuff you're doing. You're writing stuff down so that way you know exactly what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. Production is then putting your money where your mouth is. Taking all that you wrote down, you made notes on, and actually going out and capturing the clips. You'll have the notes to then go off of what you're going to shoot. Therefore, it should be easy when it comes to post-production, which is putting that all together. You've got your categorized list of what you did and how you did it. You've got all the clips to get it done, the voiceover, the music, etc. Now you're going to edit that and put it together. These are the three main things you should be thinking about when you go out to make a video or to shoot a project. Within there, these are the three things that you should consider as you're going. Now, again, there are more things to consider on your cameras for how strong or for resolution they can do. There's even other things too for like Apple ProRes, which is a huge feature that Sony and Leica cameras have access to, and other brands as well. There's many different things, but I would sit here and just give you the bare bones: video resolution, your ratio, and your FPS. If you've bought a TV in the last 5 years, you probably already know what video resolution is. They take the amount of pixels by one way, the amount of pixels by the other way, they multiply those together, and then divide it by the diagonal. That's where you're getting those numbers for. If you're watching the news today, they're in standard HD or they're in standard definition. If you're watching the newer movies that are coming out today, they might be in 4K, they also still could be in HD. And for the most part, there is no content that is coming out in 8K unless you're watching videos on YouTube that some people are putting together. But use the video resolution that's the most appropriate for the content you're making and for what you're doing. For the ratios, that's the sensor size. For the most part, you're going to use a 4:3. 4:3 that uses the entirety of your sensor. If you're trying to be a little bit more creative and you want to play with the aspect ratios, 3:2 will give it a little bit of a black bar, but 16:9 will give it the biggest black bar that you'll see. Again, the best way to think about that is just the widescreen to full screen debate. That's the way I think about with it. Widescreen was getting to that longer ratio because they were getting rid of the square model TVs, whereas full screen was going to that full square screen. Now, if you're shooting content for online, for Instagram, social media, a 1:1 creates a perfect square on your image. So if that's something that you're trying to do, it might be easier to film all your content in that. That way you know what you're filming in, and that way you also don't have to crop in later. Lastly, frames per second, FPS. If you think about it, all video is just pictures stacked on top of each other that then show an object in motion. So 12 frames a second is the standard. Most news recordings are in 12 frames a second. Most movies that you see are in 24 frames a second. Unless there's an extreme slow motion scene or some other extreme scene that you're that you might see in like a Vin Diesel movie or a Michael Bay film, then yes, you might see 60 to 120. But most movie films are using 24 seconds, or 24 frames a second on their videos. That being said, if you want slow motion, more frames is always better. If you're shooting something that's very standard or point and blank, lesser frames will do the trick. It takes up less space on your files. The must-haves when you're shooting: camera quality, lighting, and audio quality are your three most important. When I was getting ready to teach this class years ago, my marketing and my video team told me one important thing. They said 2 have to be good, 1 can be bad. If 2 are bad and 1 is good, no one's going to watch your video. And if all 3 are bad, you might as well just quit now. Make sure you have good camera quality. That doesn't mean you have to buy the best camera possible, but buy something that's appropriate for what you're doing. That'll always be the best way to sell your stuff. Lighting, choose something that works best for you. Natural lighting's great, but I'll show you some other options you might want to get into. And audio quality, microphones. Microphones are huge in the game, again, and I'll explain a little bit more about those. So, to start, this is what is considered the perfect lighting for studio. Perfect lighting in general. They call it the 3-point lighting method. A key light, which is your main light, does all the heavy lifting for you, but it's going to create bad shadows. Those bad shadows are then fixed with the fill light. Fill light comes in and it'll take away those harsh shadows, yet now you look a little bit flat against your background. That's where the backlight comes in. It helps pop against that background. We can't all have this type of lighting. I've made this lighting at home using lamps and stuff around the house. I've unplugged stuff and moved it around. You don't have to buy anything fancy to make this work, but we don't all have access to even that. Some of us don't own lamps. If that's the case, there are other options for you to get into. On-camera flashes exist. LED lights or light blocks are fantastic too. And during COVID, that era of ring lights, those things were so popular, and a lot of content creators are still using them today. They put a lot of light on the subjects if you're taking pictures or videos. Microphones. The best way to think about this, people, is if you ever bought a TV in the last how many years, I'm sure the person you talked to recommended a sound bar. The reason they do that isn't because they're trying to sell you more. It's because the TVs just aren't built with good speakers anymore. Cameras are no different. Camera speakers and camera microphones are just garbage. But they do that because they encourage you to invest in better audio if that's what you're looking for. And they also put so much focus on the image quality that they neglect the audio quality. Still there, but still isn't that good. So in-camera mics exist. On-camera mics are better. Wireless mics are some of the more popular thing you'll see. If you're using a wireless mic, you can actually plug in a lavalier mic and actually have a little wireless connection up to you, so make it easier. And if you're doing a production of some sorts and you need more that you can see, boom mics are also great examples of things that you can get to. You don't see that often on smaller productions, but it does exist. Stabilizing your shot, so keeping a nice focus on the shot so it doesn't have a shaky quality. Easiest way to go are tripods. Now I put all 3 of these under the tripods, yet the first one's a mono. It's a stick, easy to transport. Your still photo tripod ball head joint, a lot of words, but that is your standard photo tripod. It's not necessarily the best for video, but it's good for locking into a firm position so you can get that shot regardless of what your environment is. Whereas a video tripod has the pan, tilt, and roll feature. It's good for video, it's good for making sure that you get smooth and fluid motions while you're recording your video too. One of the last things I'll share with you, and the next should be all I have, is gimbals and stabilization. So for those of you who are doing video and you're running and gunning, you might be interested in getting a different form of stabilization. Now, like I have grips on the side of my camera when I'm doing video work, but gimbals exist too. If you're walking around, moving a bunch, you might get a shaky grip if you were to hold it like this. The gimbal swivels and stabilizes you so that you're less likely to get that. Two-handed gimbals exist and do something similar. And the body gimbal / stabilizer vest also exists in that same way. Again, most of the stuff might be overkill, but a lot of people come in looking for gimbals. They're very useful and you can get a lot of good use out of it. that is all I have for you guys for this class. I try to keep it within an hour, and then if there's any questions, we have another 30 minutes here. But my name is Saxon. If you don't feel comfortable asking questions now, feel free to take my information. I'm here every day except for Tuesday, Wednesdays. You can call or email me anytime. Next week is beyond the traditional camera. So we're going to step away from mirrorless and DSLR. We're going to get into drones, GoPros, action cameras. What I like to think of those are their tools. They're extra additional tools that you have in your tool belt. So when you're working on something, you don't have to just use your expensive mirrorless or DSLR. You can bust out your drone or your action camera to help assist get that shot. So that'll be next Thursday, and then we'll restart again in the beginning of September. Thanks, guys, for joining. If you have any questions, feel free to chat. And if you got any questions, feel free to ask them. Yeah, what you got? That's all I got for them. If anyone has anything on this.
I'm going to set the date on this.
Yeah, let's
Make sure I got the JPEG.
Sure.
We'll do 8x10. That's my biggest thing is learning all this stuff.
Yeah. It takes a little bit, and that's where that intro to cameras will be great.
Yeah, I'm going to watch that. I think I got your...
Yeah. So you're shooting on manual.
Yeah, and it's working out pretty good. So.
Perfect. So one of the things we can do is if we press the FN, so we can look at focus mode. Right now you have manual focus on.
Yeah.
That's what you want. Beautiful. So let's look at your image quality. So if we scroll down to creative stuff. JPEG. So you're at the file format. So under quality and image size 1, JPEG's there. You've got it set for fine. That's one of the better ones. You can set it to extra fine. That's up to you. Extra fine will give you a little bit better image quality, but it uses more battery and more storage because of that. And then you've got it set for large, which is great. That means you're using the 24 megapixels. So for any reason, let's say you were going out, and one of the events I do is I shoot for our charity event here. I take pictures of the donor signs. I don't need to take a file that's 24 megapixels for them. They don't need that, so I can lower it. So if you were taking lesser images and you didn't need to overload your camera, you could always go in and set the sizes to be a little smaller, saves on space. Might not be necessary. And then your aspect ratio is at 32. So you're good there. So all that's set properly.
What about the date? How do I get this date? Show 2019. I'm trying to look this up.
Let's see. So that should be within setup menu, volume. Date setup.
Can find it.
Let's do this. Let's turn daylight saving on. This is August. Let's do 20.
First, 21st.
This is 2025. It is 6:26 p.m. Perfect. That should show the correct time from now on. So now, if I just take a quick picture, I hit the playback button, and I hit, yep, August 21st, 2025, 6:26 p.m.
Now what about, like you said, for 8x10s, 25?
Oh, for printing them?
Yeah.
Oh, you're good. So you're crop sensitive.
Yeah.
So you can print it. You can basically, what I would recommend for you would be any of the top sizes.
60 pictures of that.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful.
Some Lexington.
Yeah.
I'm a pilot, so I bring it with, and if I have time,
Yeah.
I give me enough time, I just walk around in the city or wherever I'm at and take pictures.
That's the best way to get into it, and that's the. I think you started with a great camera to get, because I think that a lot of people, they jump up too high for what it's worth, and I think the 6100 is one of my favorites from Sony. It's a good starting point.
You'll get used to it. You'll outgrow it after you use it a bunch, but then I'd say 6-7 years from now, probably time to upgrade.
And then, yeah, you're right. I like it a lot. There's so much. I still don't know what it does, but
Yeah.
what else did you ask me? Oh, what kind of for my laptop editing? I got the Sony imaging.
Sony imaging's good. There is a company called Affinity that I really like.
Yeah.
So instead of Infinity, it's AF.
Yeah.
My Sony rep put me onto that one. That one you pay like $70-$80 for one time, and then it's you don't have to
I
pay.
just want to plug in and just upload it, so I get.
Oh yeah, then you can just plug in the camera. You can just plug the camera directly into the computer.
It doesn't seem like my computer has any. Do I buy something?
Doesn't have any USB ports.
No, it doesn't have a program. But what should I buy? Like,
Oh,
Yeah.
that Affinity. I just do the Affinity photo. That's the easiest one. Affinity. AF, yeah. So
just buy it online.
you go online for it, yeah. Or the thing is, your computer has a free one on there. Usually, if you right-click on the image,
Yeah.
there should be a tool that says Edit, and then that'll pop up your free photo editor that comes with the computer.
I'll look.
I'd say majority of people, especially if those are JPEG,
Yeah.
that'll do just fine.
Affinity.
And if that's not enough, then I would do Affinity.
I use
or
Sony
something.
imaging in my phone, but I want something on my desktop
Yeah,
different.
yeah.
Sony
Try it.
imaging is a little bit difficult.
Yeah, I like the Affinity. I wish I had an example of it, but it works really well, and I just like that you don't have to pay like. I mean, Adobe for the for Photoshop you pay like $30 a month,
Yeah.
and then for some of these other ones you pay like $200-$300 to get it. I like the Affinity because I pay I think $60 or $80 for it, and I don't have to renew it for 10 years.
Affinity, yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah.
I've heard of it.
So
And zoom lens, eventually I want to get one, but I don't want to get too crazy. I don't want to be like some of these people. I'm not doing birds.
you should look at like an 18 to 1. So like there's I think it's like 18 to 140
Right.
or 18 or 24 to 180, something around there. It's probably about this tall.
Yeah.
It'll still kind of zoom out on you,
Yeah.
but it'll give you good range where you can get wide angle. Then you can get the like nice tight shot if you have the bird or something in the distance.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I'll talk to you more about it. I saw you. I think I was here a few days ago. So
Yeah, I'm always floating around. Myself or we got a few other guys down there. Gino's really good if I'm not here. Gino's excellent
Okay.
and stuff. Come see us anytime.
yeah, thank you. This is good.
Yeah, thanks for
All
coming.
right, I'll watch some of your
Appreciate
stuff.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me come in again.
Yeah, by all means. Try to come in that first Thursday of September.
It's all off my schedule.
I know.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
That's a pie. I can only imagine it's a pie.
Never consistent.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Take care, be
All
safe.
right, thank you. Thank you.
Enjoy Thursday.
Yep. We're gonna throw these out.
I'll take it. I got it.
All right. Thank you.
Anytime. Alright, people. It doesn't look like anybody has any comments, questions, or concerns for me. So I think I'll end the class there. Thanks for joining. As always, everybody, today was the third Thursday of the month, which means that next Thursday is beyond the traditional cameras. We'll talk more about what goes on outside of our mirrorless and DSLR bodies. We'll talk a little bit more about things like drones, GoPros, action cameras, camcorders, how they're all separate, but how they can all add another layer to your camera experience and to your craft. So come on next week. We'll see you then, 5:30 to 7 here at Apt Electronics. Come in person or sign in online. My name is Saxon. As always, thank you for joining my classes. Thanks for taking your time. And I will see everybody next week for advanced cameras. Or sorry, beyond the traditional cameras.